Well, it's been a while since I did one of these, hasn't it? Part of what spurred me to write this one is some of my most recent experiences. Long story short, I got hungry for some commission work and submitted to a lot of people and places for my next big job opportunity in the month of June. I got a few callbacks the following month, i.e. this month, and long story short, two of the big ones that looked like ideal fits for me didn't work out. One job I hadn't heard back from, at least by the time I'm recording this, which kind of signifies to me that the person has found someone else at the moment, and the other is a whole other story. I can't give away too many details about what that other project was, but to give the basics of it, it was an animation related one, and I was eager to get my foot in the door of this industry and finally get some potential full-time position that would be my first step away from my current minimum wage day job and towards my full-time career as an artist. I still do get paid to do art commissions, but I'm still not in a position to commit to it full-time. Again, I cannot stress enough how little my current no-skill labor job as a gas station attendant helps me get by. In my state, my hourly wage is below the poverty level, even with an advance I currently have, and I cannot cover a significant chunk of the bills by myself. I need my family's help with that. Not helped by that is those days at my job where my buttons are constantly being pushed by every which way. I put up with a lot of crap from the worst kinds of people daily, in the most miserable work conditions, just to pay the bills, and the only thing that helps me get through the day is the eager anticipation that I get to come home and work on something promising, or eagerly await to see if I just landed that perfect ideal job. Basically, as I was eagerly ready to accept this position, hoping that it would be how I get my career off the ground, the only thing that stopped me from immediately accepting is that I had a long, difficult discussion with my family about the rates I should charge for my work and whether this project was even one that was suited for me in the first place. And I don't say that to make my family out to be one that doesn't think I can't make a living as an artist. Far from it. Do you think that I'd even have been able to attend college and several $1,000 training school in the first place if that was the case? But really, my mother, speaking from her own experience and having spent over a decade financing her own business, was really trying to make sure that I did not fall prey to some very basic mistakes that people of my age tend to fall prey to. All this business talk has not been easy, I can assure you. Seeing as this opportunity was a potential breakthrough, it wasn't easy to think about how it wouldn't be. After all, I had been waiting so patiently and done so much searching and applying, I was basically starving for this kind of work. And fortunately, I knew that my family was on my side the whole way, and they had my best interest the whole time. They just wanted to make sure that if I were to do this job, that I was getting paid my worth for my talents and that I wasn't selling myself short. My family insisted that I settle on a price for it, but when I proposed my workers the price, they told me that it wasn't going to work out and they let me go. They said that my prices were unreasonable, and even though we would have looked into the industry and some results would suggest that such wages should be reasonable for animators in the field, this was one of those instances where I simply had to accept that it wasn't going to work out and that this job probably wasn't going to work for me in the long run, despite my dear hopes that it would. And in some details in hindsight, it was pretty dubious undertaking anyways, with some questionable decisions about how this was an independent project and how it would get off the ground to begin with. My experience with this job opportunity that fell through reminds me of an anxiety that I faced just 2 years ago when I was at one of the lowest points in my life and getting one of the highest paid gigs of my life. I even did an update vlog about it in November 2019. There was this constant underlying worry of the rug being pulled out from underneath me, and that if I was getting paid big bucks for this project, I was shuddering to think about the consequences if my products were not considered worth that much. Now, because I did archive what I was thinking at that point in the form of that video, I wasn't as crushing this time to not get this gig, but it was eye-opening, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed on some level. But hey, that's life, and we all need to get used to disappointment. I wasn't left feeling so much crushed by this outcome as contemplative. It inspired me to go into a topic about the art versus commerce debate from the perspective of the independent artist, and how difficult it is to find that exact market of an audience who will value your worth. In fact, right after the fall through of this whole deal, I felt compelled to get out all my thoughts and this editorial started writing itself almost. I suppose this is partially where artists get the reputation for being arrogant. Like, who are we to charge this much for something that nobody is going to die, per se, if they don't have it hanging up on their wall in their library, when they should be saving up on the stuff that they need to survive? What humorists we must have to think that we are worth this much, right? Well, have you ever considered the artist who put thousands of hours and even so much as tens of thousands of pounds, dollars, or whatever currency into schooling and honing a craft, on top of the amount that we need to spend for art supplies and monthly software subscriptions. And yes, there's the argument to be made that you don't need to go to school to become educated in your field and hone your craft, and that you could get so much more perspective by watching videos and reading biographies and such. But the fact that some of us did pay to go to school and did pay to get personal critiques and some one-on-one coaching from a select individual to help us find our footing, and that we invested all that much on the off chance that whatever degree we might graduate with is no guarantee that we will find a job, goes to show how serious we were about how much we wanted this. Not to mention that animation specifically is one of those mediums where it's very easy, especially for audience members who aren't well acquainted with the industry, to take for granted how long it really takes to animate just a few seconds of a half-hour TV show, depending on how dynamic the whole thing is. This common mindset amongst the public that we don't need to set our prices so high for something that we are theoretically happy to do anyways leads to artists undervaluing themselves and working for cheap and leading to some long, unsatisfying lives in the end. This kind of reminds me of that SpongeBob episode, The Original Fry Cook, where SpongeBob discovers that he can't hope to ever rival the patty-making skills of Jim, the titular original fry cook, but the reason that he works at the Krusty Krab is because he works for cheap. We all know that the part of the humor of the show comes from a slightly more cynical view that allows us to make light of some of the cruelties of the world, but I think most fans of the show do agree that SpongeBob deserves a lot better than that cheapskate Krabs. I mean, make no mistake. There are some artists who gave up a job that they hated despite its steady pay for a lower paying job that they just feel completes them personally. And of course, there are some artists who definitely think that their work is their livelihood. Even in my case, if you've seen my other channel where I produce musical animatics, I was happy to produce those and share them with the world. And I was largely compelled to make them because I had a vision for them, and I didn't want to wait for someone else to get my vision out for me. But I didn't make a penny off of any of those. I've not monetized either one of my channels. I suppose I could look into making content on YouTube that I can monetize, but not only do you hear stories all the time about how time and energy consuming it is to produce and go through the copyright hurdles, especially if your regular job is already time and energy consuming, how YouTube takes a good chunk of revenue, how it has to be advertiser friendly, and how even in spite of all that you can still get flagged, and so many other unspoken details. People may shower your work with compliments, and those compliments can be a great motivator to keep producing, which is why we don't take them for granted. But the process of continuing to grow a sustainable living requires a lot more that you just can't expect people to pour into your lap, especially if they're regular people on the street struggling to get by themselves. When you exhaust your energy into the job that pays your bills, your energy becomes quickly depleted until you can produce no more, or whatever you do end up being able to produce has lost its shine. We see so much of this elitist mindset on the internet where advocates of whatever art form will declare themselves defenders of the artist against the evils that be greedy corporations. Whatever credence there is to earn corporations that reputation, these online personas who try to make themselves believe that they have the best interests in mind have tendency to default to certain claims like, these people are playing it too safe, we should demand better if these people can do better, this artist would not have wanted this company to do with what their work, they're getting screwed over, all that stuff. The latter there, that's not advocating the preservation of an artist's integrity as much as you think. That's just using them as a tool to justify your own biases. I know how futile and finite it is in the long run to persistently fight and say, my hero says this, my hero was unique, therefore he must be right, and more people should think like him or her. I was at that point in my life once where I had the subconscious mindset of taking my hero's words as the gospel truth rather than a simple perspective. That's basically why I started my Arts versus Commerce series to begin with, to spread how some of my own perspectives have changed and all the ways that I feel I've matured over the years to backtrack the spread of this abundance of elitism and distinguish it from advocating letting artists produce what they want and are capable of producing. As an artist, though, when you're down on your luck and hungry for work, especially anything that could potentially be your breakthrough moment, and even if the warning signs are there, you still hope you're wrong, and there's still this part of your brain that convinces you to give this one a go and pray that luck is just as much on your side as your experiences, and that things will work out. After all, the world of art is a continuously experimental one, and you can never know realistically whether you've got a masterpiece on your hands or not. We put so much emphasis on the stories about how some of the greatest artists in studios like Pixar and how all their biggest accomplishments were a crapshoot. It's hard to separate luck and talent when the results are successful, but that's something that we take so much for granted as consumers, even ones who are more hardened fans. But it's easy to neglect how 9 times out of 10, those crapshoots are failures. Even if the people behind them are strategic and have experience playing their cards right, there's no special formula to making something that clicks with the general public. Which is why it's just as arrogant, arguably more so, to accuse a product of playing it too safe or being a product of greed instead of passion right out of the gate. If you're someone who is so invested in the art and entertainment industry, be it with film, video games, comics, or what have you, that you keep track of things like sales and box office records to see something you love not sell well, it stings at the best of times, because it's disheartening to see something that you consider such an admirable craft to be undervalued this way. And it's a very harsh reminder of how the world isn't fair. But of course, this is also why I do my best not to get up in arms when something that I personally don't think is that good gets to be successful for reasons that I personally can't understand. I don't go with the whole underdog mentality. I can still stand by my own opinion that a product is bad and that the hard work put into it didn't pay off, or even at the very least, I feel it doesn't live up to the hype that has been built around it, but I'd still be remiss to undervalue and belittle the workers behind it. If you don't extend fairness to even that you don't like, then fairness will eventually be extended to no one and nothing. That's part of the art of good faith criticism. It's not just about thinking that something can be better just because it lives up to your own personal standards or appeals specifically to you. But artists have the same basic needs as everyone else in this world, and they don't get all the revenue back from what is paid to them. Artists also have to pay taxes from the income of their art. They have to pay back the materials and supplies and software. There are submission fees when it comes to showcasing something to the public in a gallery or a theater, and loads of other things before finally coming down to whatever is left to pay bills, feed families, put away savings, and whatever else. So the ideal image of the American dream where artists are swimming in residuals and living in the lap of luxury, that's one a lot of artists like to fantasize about one day achieving, but so few ever actually do get to achieve it. So few people do get remembered in the long run for their work, and I can assure you that there are probably several uncredited names behind whatever your favorite property is, even if it's not one of those instances like what we recently got with the whole fiasco about Looney Tunes veteran Dave Alvarez not getting credited on his work for the recently released Space Jam: A New Legacy. One last thing I'd like to bring up that applies to me specifically that I want to mention: I'm a jack of all trades. If you go on to either one of my YouTube channels or any of my various website links, you'll find that I don't have any one fixed passion as an artist or a person. I love animating, I love producing caricatures and landscape art, I love writing editorials like this, even some movie reviews. One of my motivations for being like this is because I know there are millions of people in this world, and different people value different things. So you want to be as diverse in your talents as well as your interests to garner the widest following you possibly can and find the right group for you. You never know when you might find just what you need in your life in places you never would have thought to look. However, this also seems to be where my biggest weakness lies. When getting some constructive feedback from one source, it was to look at the portfolios of my favorite figures in the business. And I think that suggestion right there just highlighted one of my biggest struggles with deciding my long-term career and what kind of artist I wanted to be. I have been experimenting for years because I have difficulty deciding what kind of art I'm best suited for and whether or not I know exactly which crowd I'm aiming to appeal to. I have so many figures whom I look up to, and I would not be who I am today without their influence. I don't know who to prioritize as far as that goes. I don't know whose experience I can learn the most from when I'm stumbling around in the dark trying to find my own path. And when it comes to anyone, that's something I can imagine easily leading one to undervalue themselves and their talent when looking at another by comparison. This is yet another reason why artists have trouble with deciding what their own talent is worth. So the reason that we artists put on a front of not being afraid to say no and be uncompromising in our positions regarding to setting prices and sticking with our guns on what we create is because we simply can't afford to be. So the reason that we artists put on a front of not being afraid to say no and be uncompromising in our positions regarding to setting prices and sticking to our guns on what we create is because we simply can't afford to be. Believe me, I have started out being willing to work for peanuts under the feeling that asking for anything more would make me look like a greedy, arrogant fool. It may look like the artist is willing to try and take advantage of the consumer, but arguably, the reverse is more often the case. We simply can't settle for less. Since life is a game where the rules are unfair, we have to play smart. Not everything you throw at the wall will stick, which is why it's best to have a strategy to ensure that at least one thing does. Things do have the potential to work out even if your vision and priorities are clear, and if you are open to discovering this potential you never knew you had as far as your ability to create or reach an audience member, If you develop a reputation as working for cheap, that's going to be a difficult one to break out of. As much as adamant defenders of art advocate that artists take risks, especially if an artist has a greater repertoire, some things one needs to take into account about taking risks are you ready? Do you have enough resources and enough understanding of where you are and how to invest? Do you have a reliable audience whom you can have faith in to support you, even if you go in a different direction than per usual? Things do have the potential to work out, but only if you have an effective enough strategy. And strategy requires time and investment, not just financially, but also intellectually. Business is competitive in general, and art especially so. What artists can't do is sell themselves short, yield and try to satisfy the public's every whim, or appeal to consumers who demand while audiences underestimate what it takes to put together. But what artists can do is set prices, decide who the audience for their work is, be open to connecting with newcomers in ways that never before realized, and welcome input from the audience that might be helpful to the end result of the final product. That's all I have to say with this one. I hope that your summer is going okay. I hope that you're managing to stay cool if you're out west. Hope that you're staying safe and healthy, and until next time.